He shattered the glass, and with it, my marriage, my patience, and the final illusion that we were ever equals. The wine hit my face before I even registered his hand moving. Sharp cold, humiliating. It drenched my white silk blouse and bled into the unsigned contract on the marble floor. A contract that would have handed over my company, my legacy. Around us, the room fell silent. Boston's finest politicians, socialites, venture capitalists, all frozen mid-toast. Someone's camera flashed perfect timing. The moment James Parker publicly lost control. The moment I realized I was finally free. "You ungrateful bitch," he whispered, his voice laced with the kind of venom that bruises you even when it's quiet. I didn't flinch, not anymore. Because in that moment, I remembered everything. The dinners where he made business decisions without me. The meetings he took with my partners behind my back. The way he smiled while slowly erasing my name from the company I had built with nothing but mason jars and a dream. And I remembered Mia, my best friend, raising her mimosa at my bachelorette party and saying, "Just make sure you protect what's yours, Olivia." Thank God I listened. 2 weeks before our wedding, his lawyer had sent over the prenup, and mine had added a single clause, something about protection in the event of physical aggression or public humiliation. It sounded so hypothetical back then. Now it was everything. As I stood there drenched in Merlot and fury, I didn't cry. I picked up my clutch, straightened my back, and walked to the ladies' room like I was headed to war. Inside the stall with shaking hands, I pulled out my phone, typed 3 words, "Red flag rising." That phrase was a trigger, a legal code that would freeze our joint accounts, alert my attorney, and activate the prenup I had planned for this moment, even when I never believed it would come. I stared at my reflection, wine-streaked, furious, alive. And for the first time in months, I felt relief. The lies were over. The mask had cracked, and I was done pretending. James Parker thought he'd cornered me. He thought I was weak, dependent. He thought I'd fold like every other woman who had stood next to a man with money. But he forgot something important. Seaside Botanicals was mine, and I don't give up what's mine. Not without a fight. 3 days after the gala, I loaded a single suitcase into my car. Just one? It held the essentials. Some cash, my formulation notebooks, and a flash drive with the entire DNA of my business. Everything else, marriage certificates framed awards my old self, I left behind. My lawyer had worked fast. James's public meltdown, the witnesses, the contracts soaked in wine, it had all done the heavy lifting. The prenup clause kicked in exactly as it was designed to. It froze our joint assets, shielded my company, and gave me the breathing room I desperately needed. I had no roadmap, just a destination that existed somewhere between memory and hope. As Boston's skyline shrank in my rearview mirror, I drove north, up the jagged coastline of Maine, through fog and pine and roads that curved like questions. I wasn't chasing a place. I was chasing space, to think, to feel, to begin again. Eventually, I saw the sign. "Welcome to Harbor Cove, Population 2, 837. It felt impossibly small, like the kind of number you find on a cereal box giveaway. But after the noise and pretense of Boston, it felt right. The Driftwood Inn sat perched on a bluff above the bay. It was old and rambling and looked like it had grown in pieces over the decades. Kind of like me, I thought. Inside, a woman with silver-streaked hair looked up from a crossword puzzle. Her eyes were sharp but kind. "Rough day?" she asked, eyeing my wrinkled clothes and exhausted face. I managed half a smile. "Rough week." She introduced herself as Margaret. Didn't ask for ID, didn't judge, just slid me a registration card and said, "You look like you need rest more than paperwork." And she was right. That night, I stood outside the inn, staring at the black ocean. The waves crashed in a rhythm I couldn't quite predict, but somehow that comforted me because my life had been unpredictable too, and it was still moving. I thought about who I had been, Olivia Parker, wife of a venture capitalist co-founder of a rising skincare brand. Now I was just Olivia. No titles, no press releases, no headlines. Just a woman with salt in her hair and grit in her bones. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid. The next morning, I wandered down to the community board in the Driftwood Inn's front hall. It was cluttered with hand-drawn flyers. Yoga in the park, Wednesday open mic at the Coffee House 1, ad offering free kittens, another advertising a seaweed pressing workshop. And then I saw it. Studio apartment above Boathouse Rustic, but waterproof utilities included. Suitable for single occupant first and last month's rent, cash preferred. No email, just a number. I called it. A woman answered after one ring. Her voice was clipped, firm, direct. Yes, the apartment is available. Yes, you can see it today. No, I don't need your life story. Just first and last month's rent in cash if you want it. That was it. No welcome, no small talk. Just business. Oddly, I respected that. She gave me directions. And 30 minutes later, I was standing at the end of a gravel road, staring at a weathered house perched on a rocky cliff. A second structure stood closer to the water's edge. The boathouse. The woman on the porch looked to be in her 70s. White hair cropped short, shoulders straight, eyes sharp like winter wind. Before I could even say hello, she spoke. You're running from something. It wasn't a question. It was a fact. For a second, I considered lying, making up something tidy, palatable. But I was too tired, so I told her. My husband tried to take my company, then threw wine in my face at a charity gala when I refused to sign the papers. She didn't flinch. Good, she said simply. Truth is easier to maintain than lies. You'll need fewer stories to remember. Then she turned and started walking toward the boathouse. Let's show you the apartment. William will ask questions at dinner. But that can wait. The apartment was a single room above the actual boathouse. A steep staircase led to a tiny studio with a kitchenette along one wall, a bed behind a folding screen, and a view of the ocean so beautiful it almost made me cry. The previous tenant, she said, was a poet. He'd left for an artist residency in New Mexico. The place smelled like salt cedar and possibility. I paid her in cash. She pulled a one-page lease from her pocket. No credit check, no references, no employment questions. Just a transaction between two women. One offering shelter, the other desperately needing it. Her name was Sophia. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. And somehow that was more comforting than any hug or well-wish could have been. That night, I sat at the window and watched the bay disappear into darkness. I wasn't Olivia Parker, co-founder of anything. I wasn't a wife or a press release or a socialite with a Harvard alum tag on her LinkedIn. I was just a woman in a quiet room over the ocean, trying to figure out what came next. And for the first time in a long time, I felt still. Not stuck, not frozen, just still. Like maybe this was the beginning of something I hadn't yet named. The first week in Harbor Cove passed in a blur. I worked, not in a corner office, not in boardrooms or investor pitches, but behind a counter, wiping coffee spills, stocking shelves. I picked up 2 part-time jobs, one at the cafe on Main Street, one at the community co-op grocery. No one cared about my resume. No one asked about Boston, and for once, I didn't offer. There was something healing about manual work. My hands, once used to typing out press releases and flipping through contracts, were now lifting crates and frothing milk. I got blisters. My shoulders ached, and somehow I slept better. Through those jobs, I began to see how Harbor Cove functioned. This town didn't run on titles. It ran on trust. Here, people didn't ask what you did. They watched how you showed up. A fisherman might pay for piano lessons with lobster. An artist might fix your roof in exchange for handmade soap. It wasn't just community. It was ecosystem. and I was learning how to belong in it. 2 weeks in William Sophia's husband slipped me a business card over dinner. Coastal Botanicals, he said, talk to Iris Chen. She knows her plants. So I called. Iris picked up on the first ring. William sent you find B here at 7 a.m. Bring real shoes. That was all. The next morning, I drove to the address she gave me. It was a former dairy farm, now transformed into rows of herbs and flowers, calendula, chamomile, lavender, all growing in meticulous rows, bathed in early light. Iris was already working boots caked in mud, tablet in hand, calling out instructions to her team. No smile, no welcome speech, just a pair of gloves shoved into my hands. Observation happens alongside work, so I followed. For the next few hours, I harvested blossoms. I listened as Iris explained her growing methods, slow, intentional, respectful. No chemicals, no shortcuts, just plants allowed to become what they were meant to be. Over lunch, she quizzed me about emulsions, preservative ratios, pH balancing. I answered carefully. She listened like a scientist, measured sharp. When I finished, she didn't offer praise. She just said, "You know what you're doing. That matters." Then she led me to a small lab behind the main greenhouse, dusty counters, glass beakers, a centrifuge. This was my old setup. She said, "It's not fancy, but it works. Use it until you can build your own." I stood there stunned. No NDA, no equity ask, no control, just trust. "William said you're legitimate," she added. "I believe him." And just like that, I had something I hadn't had in months, a place to begin again. No pressure, no spotlight, just permission to work. Not to prove, not to please, but to build. From the ground up, with dirt under my nails and my name once again in my own hands. Some breakthroughs arrive loud, with fireworks, applause, spotlights. Mine didn't. Mine came in the quiet. It arrived in the middle of a storm. While I was barefoot in the boathouse, surrounded by jars, extracts, failed formulas, and a notebook that smelled faintly of salt and lavender. I'd been working with seaweed, a specific variety harvested from a hidden inlet Daniel, the local marine conservation officer, had shown me. Everything I tried failed. Heat broke down the compounds. Distillation ruined the texture. Nothing worked until I remembered something William had once said about old methods, indigenous knowledge, cold infusion. No fire, just salt, time, and patience. I tried it, and what I got was magic. The extract shimmered faintly, almost like moonlight trapped in water. It felt different, soft, clean, potent. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't second-guess myself. I just moved. I worked through the night. By morning, I had 3 things. A lightweight serum that felt like a second skin. A restorative mask that soothed like sleep. A wind barrier balm that wrapped the skin like a wool blanket in winter. Each one spoke a different language, but they all whispered the same truth. Resilience, not resistance, not perfection, but the ability to bend without breaking. To adapt, to endure, like the sea, like the skin, like me. I showed the balm to Daniel the next day. His hands were cracked raw from sea spray and wind. He rubbed it in and his eyebrows rose. "This isn't like what you buy in stores," he said. "It doesn't hide damage. It helps the skin come back." Exactly. That's what I wanted. Not a beauty brand, but a philosophy. Title Resilience. A name that came to me like the tide itself. Gentle, then sudden. Skincare inspired by ecosystems that thrive under pressure. Products that help your skin respond, not retreat. Not artificial, not aggressive, but alive. "This could really work," Daniel said. "The artisan market's coming up in 2 weeks. Locals test new stuff at the community booth. You should be there." I looked around at my little workspace. Still dusty, still cobbled together from borrowed pieces. But it felt ready. Not perfect, but alive. So I said yes, not because I knew how it would go, but because for the first time since everything broke, I had something worth showing the world again. 2 weeks later, I stood behind a folding table at the Harbor Cove Artisan Market, watching people drift between booths, baskets, and burlap. It wasn't flashy. No stage. No PR team. Just sunlight, sea breeze, and a town that took pride in knowing what was made by whose hands. This time, those hands were mine. My table was simple but intentional. Small glass bottles wrapped in pressed seaweed paper. Maps made from recycled nautical charts showing exactly where I sourced my ingredients. Photos of the shoreline beside microscope images of the extracts inside. It wasn't just a product, it was a story. And people listened. By noon, there was a steady flow of curiosity. Locals approached cautiously, smelling, touching, asking detailed questions. What's the base oil here? How does this hold up in cold wind? What do you use for emulsification? Not small talk, real talk. The kind of engagement I'd always wanted but never really got when James was doing the pitching for me. Some bought samples, some gave feedback, some just nodded and said, "We'll be watching." And somehow that felt just as valuable. Then I saw her, Sophia. She didn't wave, she didn't smile, she just watched me quietly, her face unreadable. When the last customer stepped away, she approached. "Your presentation reflects thoughtful integration of local elements," she said. "Appropriate restraint in claims. Clear value proposition." Coming from Sophia, that was practically a standing ovation. She placed a business card on my table. Catherine Monroe, editor of Northeast Entrepreneur Quarterly. She's staying at the inn. I've mentioned your work. I blinked, caught between gratitude and panic. Before I could respond, Sophia continued calm, certain. "You've found your footing more quickly than expected. Harbor Cove doesn't have to be temporary." Olivia. "Some of us come here thinking it's a detour and stay because we realize it's a foundation." I felt something shift in me, some question I hadn't dared to ask myself. Finally, askable. Was this just my hiding place, or was it becoming home? I looked around at my setup. The ocean in the distance. Locals rubbing balm on their wind-burned cheeks. The way Iris had nodded when she passed earlier. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was rebuilding something that had been lost. I felt like I was building something new, with hands that knew what they were doing, with people who saw me, and a voice I didn't have to fight to be heard. Dinner. Sophia said Tuesday at 7, Catherine will be there. And just like that, another door opened. 10 months. That's how long it had been since I left Boston with nothing but emergency cash, a suitcase, and a broken version of myself. Now, I stood on the deck of my own cottage, bought with money from a finalized settlement paid for by scars turned into wisdom. The wind was picking up storm clouds gathered out over the water, but I wasn't afraid. I'd been through worse. The cottage was modest, but it was mine. Overlooking the bay, tucked between old pines and rock, it felt like a place that had been waiting for me to arrive. Sophia and William came by that afternoon carrying housewarming gifts as only they would. A weather station for tracking harvesting conditions, a regional guidebook on coastal plants, and a brass barometer from another century that still worked like new. Proper anchoring, William said, surveying the porch. A business needs roots. He wasn't just talking about the land. I knew that. Sophia stayed behind a moment longer. She stood at the doorway, hand on the frame. "Transformation isn't linear," she said. "There will be old patterns that try to return. You'll need to watch for them." I nodded. Because she was right. The end of a battle doesn't mean the war is over. Some fights just change shape. That evening, I got the final email from my lawyer. Settlement transferred. Documents filed. No more delays, no more James. Officially completely done. I stepped back out onto the deck. The ocean roared below. Fishing boats returned to harbor their lights, blinking through the rising mist. The sky split open with light and storm, and something like rebirth. And I let the rain hit me. Not running from it, not shielding against it, just standing there, letting the weather wash through me. Because I'd learned something about storms, that they don't always destroy. Sometimes they reveal. Tidal resilience wasn't just a product line, it was me. Strong, scarred, and salt-touched. Able to bend without breaking. Able to build again, smarter, slower, truer. The Olivia who left Boston would never have believed this version of herself existed, but I had built her with bare hands and broken pieces, with grit and quiet rage and grace. And love, not romantic love, self-love. So whatever storms come next, I'll meet them here. With my feet planted, my name fully mine, and my future undeniably, unapologetically my own.